Okie dokie do. Good afternoon to the Bendigo Tech Schools I don't know why I said it like that. The Bendigo Tech Schools live streaming sessions for this week. I'm just going to jump right into it across over here. Alrighty, so this, if you remember, we're doing two-parters this week and next week. So I've kind of got like a little project to do for each two-parter live stream. So if you tuned in yesterday, and why wouldn't you tune in on a Monday afternoon back at school, we were talking about our project for these two sessions was going to be creating a lightbox, in particular creating a lightbox in Illustrator and then exporting that and laser cutting it. So the end of part one, this is what we got up to, or what I got up to. So I might just recap that for people that didn't see that session. Now, of course, you can watch any of those sessions back. They're all still there as well. If you go to our past streams on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see them all. But I'll do a quick recap. So a couple of things that we did. Number one, we were going to look at doing a light box. We looked at a couple of examples that were made out of paper. And of course, the good thing with the laser is it is much easier to cut stuff than trying to use like a Stanley knife or a blade like that. So we're going to use our laser. We talked about the fact that, yes, we can actually laser cut paper if we wanted to. Just got to be really, really careful with our power and speed settings so we don't, burn all the stuff. But we talked about using potentially a plywood, and in this case a 3mm plywood, to make a light box. And this is what we have here. So I showed you a website, and there are a bunch more. I looked at a whole bunch yesterday. People sent me a whole bunch more, where you just Google, box maker on the internet, and you'll find a billion programs which will basically create this box shape that we have up here for you, and you can choose obviously the slots and tabs. So you can see how this is going to slot in. Obviously that's going to be bent around at 90 degrees. But there's a bunch of websites which will do all the hard work for you. You just put in like your material height, your thickness, your depth, the girth, all those kind of things, and it will automatically spit out a document for you. So yeah, I wouldn't call it cheating. I'd call it being more efficient. I mean, it's going to be perfect, all right? If your students were doing this, I would get them to do it the long way first, and then once they kind of have that idea of how it works, then maybe show them the shortcuts to save them some time. So that's what we did. We created that box. Then we used a bunch of tools in Illustrator. We used the text tool here, and that text tool, if you remember, was the type on path tool, where we got it to kind of follow that circular path. So we wanted to make that kind of a moon. We talked about how, for instance, if we wanted to keep those shapes in there, I'll just zoom in a bit, we need to kind of remove some of the anchor points so we can kind of keep some material shapes in there. We talked about using shapes to create shapes. We talked about with this NASA logo how we could get like a transparent PNG file and bring that in and use the live traceability of Illustrator to kind of create vectors of it, or in this case, because this is I guess a Creative Commons logo and it was in SVG format, we just imported that in there. And that is it. So today's session is going to be a shorter one because we've done all the hard work, and I assume, of course, you've done all the homework as well, and you've made this. So now this next part is just going to be cutting this. So how we set this file up for cutting on a laser cutter. So this shouldn't take too much time at all. So let me jump into that. I'm just going to jump across here. All right, everything's okay there. And I'm just going to switch across to Lightburn. All right. So this is the software I would recommend. I've done a few videos on Lightburn now. It's really, really good software for laser cutting, especially if you're using, like most of the laser cutters I've seen around the schools around Bendigo, those bigger kind of, I guess, they call them Chinese laser cutters. They're really big ones which are made in China, like all laser cutters, but they're big machines that use kind of what's called Baruda controllers, or some other kind of different controllers as well. So these are the controllers that this software uses. So if your laser cutter looks like that, which most of them do, mine pretty much looks like that as well, this software is perfect for you. And I've done more videos on this, like longer videos, which talk about how to use the software, how to use it with your laser cutter. It really is a jack of all trades. So not only do you set up your project for cutting through this, but you can also create your project in there as well. So I could create this project within Lightburn if I wanted to, because it does have vector tools as well. It's got really good node editing tools, actually. I think I like their node editing tools more than Illustrator. But I have used Illustrator a lot more, obviously, and I know it a lot better. So I'm still creating my files in Illustrator and then importing them into Lightburn to get ready for laser cutting. So let's do that. So all we need to do is we have this file saved. Okay, so YouTube and Lightbox, I'll just save that again. We'll jump into Lightburn and then we just import our file. Now I'm guessing that's going to be on the desktop. Cool. Okay. So there it is there. So I've just imported it, okay? And you can probably see some funkiness going on here. So if you have a look, if we kind of zoom out here, I still had that really massive logo file that I was playing around with before in there. So I can delete that, or I can leave it in there and I'll just delete that as well. So let me just get rid of that. We don't need it. All right, and now that we're down here, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna turn off that and just get rid of this pink. Sometimes you get these kind of extra lines. Okay, there we go. So first up, you can see it's obviously all in black, because if you have a look down here, what I've got here is the black line that we had. It has by default said it wants to be a fill mode. So in other words, it's going to engrave all of that, which clearly we don't want to do. If I have a look at the preview here, we can see it's going to take 44 minutes because it's going to engrave all of that. And it's not what we want. So let's just switch that to a line. So that's our cut line. There we go. So now what we have here is these are all the lines that it's going to cut. Okay. And you can see it's going to follow through that path. Now, because this is a lightbox, it's pretty much all going to be cutting because that's what we decided we wanted to do. So this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a quick one. If I preview this, we can see here, we can see the cuts it's going to take. All right. And that's the path it's going to follow. Now, if you look at things like if I go into my optimization settings here, you can see I've got things like cutting inner shapes first, which is important. Make sure that's turned on. So it'll cut out all of these shapes here before it cuts out this bigger shape, because you don't want to cut out this big shape and that material might, move around a bit or drop depending on where your material is placed. And then it goes and cuts these and it, could be all a little bit off center. So make sure you have your inner shapes cut first. A lot of the other stuff here is just for speed. So I wouldn't stress about that as long as you've got inner shapes cut first. Okay. And then I'll go through this again. So then we have this cutting mode. So we have our speed and our max and min powers. Okay. So our speed is how fast the laser head is traveling, okay, across the workspace. So if we jump back here, let me just, where was that picture of a laser cutter? So you've got this laser head here. So that's going to move left and right and up and down. And so the speed of that is how fast it's going to travel in millimeters, basically a second, for cutting. All right, so the faster it does that, obviously the quicker your job gets done, but the faster it cuts, you might need to kind of compensate that with more power because it's going to be spending less time, obviously, on the material because it's going really fast. If it was going slow, that power is going to be hitting that material longer, therefore it's going to cut it like deeper material. If it goes faster, okay, it may not cut it. So what we need to do here is we need to figure out what our max speed can be and what our max power can be to get a cut that we want. Now, again, I've talked about this a few times. This is an area where you do need to do some testing on your laser cutter back at school to find the power settings that your machine uses for the material you are using, right? So laser cutters are different. They all have different powered lasers. So in terms of the wattage of the laser, for instance, the Trotec we use at the tech schools are... Okay, darling. Well, I'll have to give it to you in 1 minute, okay?
Oh, but I'm hungry.
Okay, Dal, but can you grab a bar from the cupboard? Okay. I thought we diffused that one. So the laser cutter at the tech school is like 100 watt. Mine's about 110 watt. They all vary, hobby lasers or smaller laser cutters could be 40 watts. So the power is really important. And the more power you have in that laser, the more you can cut. So in terms of this percentage, that's the percentage of your max power that your laser can handle. All right, so if you've got a 100 watt laser, it's going to use 60% of that power. Now, it's always better to never kind of run your laser at 100%. You don't want to kind of overwork it. So I always try and keep my numbers pretty low, 60%, 70%. I think the most I go is sometimes 80% if I'm cutting some really thick material. But you can also do multiple passes. So if you don't want to really power it that high, you can do like 2 passes of maybe 60% or something like that. So anyway, you need to figure out what that power is to speed. So the more power you have, okay, it means probably the faster you can cut, which means you're going to get your job done quicker. The slower it goes, you might have to increase your power if you want it to go. You can decrease your power. So if I drop this down to say, 200 in speed, I could probably bring the power down to 30. Okay, because it's traveling slower, therefore the power is more concentrated on each spot. So you've really got to figure this out. And also by doing that as well, you might find if that power is more concentrated on a certain spot, you could get burning, you could get kind of ash, those kind of things. So it really is something you have to test out. And like I said, every machine is different. So my settings for say 3mm plywood is going to be completely different for your settings for 3mm plywood. Okay, because your laser cutter is different. So in terms of this was 3mm plywood. So I know with mine, in terms of cutting, I can go at 65 speed and a max power of, actually no, I always get this around the wrong way. Let's go 65 and about 60%. Okay, whoops, 60% here. So for me, that's the settings that I can use to cut. So it's going pretty fast and I'm not using a huge amount of power, and it will cut through that 3mm perfectly to leave a nice kind of caramelized edge, which is nice, and I won't get big burns on the bottom of the material. So I'll just okay that. So yeah, again, you need to kind of figure that out. Now I showed this last time, but the easiest way to do that, to figure out how your machine works, is let's just say you've got 3mm material here. All right, what I'm going to do is let's create an array. All right, so I'm just going to go over here and draw a box, and then over here I've got an array tool, and I'm just going to say, let's have 3 by 3 or 4 by 4. Okay, so now I have these boxes here. So what we can do, and this is just testing, right? If we want to figure out what we need to actually cut through this, is you might change this one. I'm just going to change this to blue. I'm going to change this to red. And I'm just changing the layers here. I'm going to change this to green. Okay, and I'll change over here. You can see now I've got 3 different layers. I'll make sure they're all lines. And then what we can do here is we can start to adjust these. So I might, in this one, I might have, say, 250 at 80. Okay. And then the blue, we could have at a different, the blue 500 at 60. The green could be, again, you just keep changing all of these to whatever works. Let's just try going really fast. Let's try going like 600 and maybe at 70. So now that we have that kind of range, what it's going to do now, what laser the Lightburn's going to do, is it's going to actually see all these settings are different. So it's going to cut this one at that speed and power. Then it's going to move to this one here and cut it at that speed and power, move to this one here. And so what you're going to do is you can then cut all these at different speeds and powers, and then take the material out and have a look which one cut the best. You know, so a whole bunch may have cut out, some may have got stuck in the material, some may be burnt, some may be not. But that's a real quick way to then figure out what the best setting is for your material. Okay, there you go, side lesson. Anyway, let's delete that. And we'll bring this across here. All right, and that's, like I said, is pretty much it and ready to go. Now, you can do some things. I wouldn't recommend doing it with this one. So you can see here, that fits perfectly in there, okay? What's gonna happen, obviously, if the laser kind of cuts through there, is we made a compensation for that laser cut, which is why we have these separate files here. So I would keep them as separate pieces, because we made a compensation for that fitting in there to make a tight fit. But if you wanted to make it a tighter fit, okay, and you're designing this from scratch, you might do something like this, where you can kind of actually, if I just grab these two, it's all about, you know, being, I guess, saving material. Like that'll fit perfectly in there. Okay, and when I cut, it'll remove the overlapping lines. It'll just do one cut there, but get all 3 of those things will get cut. So there's some things that you can obviously think about. And that's about it. Okay, so we'll cut this out. We'll then slot this together through here. All right, we had our circle down there. I might move that somewhere else to run our power through. Okay, we might mount that on the back of the board here. We've put in an LED, we collect some battery power, and we're done. So that is part 2. So pretty simple, like I said, to actually do the laser cutting side of things. Now, I'm just going to double check and make sure everything's going okay. Let's jump across here. All right, we're all doing good. Let's just have a quick look. I just want to make sure there's no comments. No, wonderful. All right, so that's basically it. That's how we'll cut our box out. So you can see I group those two together so I don't keep missing them. That's how we'll cut our light box out. We'll put it together and then we'll test it out. Now, because we use that box making program, I would assume that these are perfect. These slots and tabs will fit in perfectly, okay? But if we need to make any changes, we can come back in and make them here. So obviously what I might do is the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to move this across here, because I do want you to actually experiment with this yourself as opposed to just watching this here. So if you do need Lightburn, if you are going to use it for your school, it is a paid for piece of software. It's very, very good software though, so I'd highly recommend it. But you can download a 30-day trial. So you can download a trial, see if it's compatible with your machine, see how it goes before you have to purchase it. So anyway, that's my heads up there. So let's have a look. I've done this before, but let's see if we can recreate something like this straight in Lightburn. So let's just say we don't have Illustrator. Okay, it is an expensive piece of software. We just have Lightburn. Let's see if we can recreate this. Now, what I might do is, see if I can find, gee, I wonder if I've still got that box. There it is there. Okay, cool. So I'll just import that box. All right, so that was the original file that we had when we were making this. So again, I've just imported that, okay? Now I'm gonna see if I can make something very similar to this, but straight in Lightburn without doing any, using Illustrator at all. So let's just move that out of the way. So let's see if I can remember what we did. All right, so we had that text and we had a circle. So let's just grab our circle and I'm gonna put that here. Just hold shift down a bit. There we go. We have our text. So let's do our text option. Lightburn works a little bit differently for text. So I'll show you what I'm going to do here. Rafferty. Don't know how to spell his name. T-Y Fox. Okay, so it doesn't really have a path, but what it does have, which I really like, is if we put that over here, you'll notice the text is a little blue dot, and I can kind of bend that like this. I kind of like that a little bit better actually than how Illustrator does it. I find I get a little bit more control because I can kind of just really manually kind of get it exactly how I want. We'll change that font to the font I use, which I think was called Happy. What was it called? Did I pass it? Hello. There we go. Okay, so there it is there. I'm just going to adjust that a touch. There we go. And I'll move that around. So we do have all of those align tools that we have in Illustrator as well. If I select those two, I'm just going to center align. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I'm just going to top align, and I'm going to center align. There we go. And I might just then manually move this up. That's going to cut in there a bit too much. So let's just kind of bring that back up to about there. All right, that's probably about right. And I can kind of merge it there. Now, I did some beveling before in Illustrator. You do have that option here as well. There's your kind of your bevel there. So with this one, again, I can kind of see how that's going to work. We'll go outward. So I can kind of play around with those two. So I can make it a little bit bigger if I wanted to. This one I can delete the original. So there's that there. So you have all the similar tools that you have in Illustrator. I'm just going to select that and I'm going to merge those together. There we go. So very, very similar. What else did I do? Okay, cool. So let's do that bit where we kind of kept that part of the A. So with this one, we go in here and we select our node. Now I'm going to actually just convert this. Let me just go back here. I'm just going to ungroup it. There we go. Because it won't allow you to do this when it's grouped. There we go in here. So what we have here is slightly different how this works. If I press D, it'll kind of delete a node. Okay, so I'll undo that. But if I move it over a path and hit D, it kind of opens that path and deletes it. So then I'm just going to kind of move this here. I'm going to select this one. I'm going to delete that. Okay, and then it's got a cool trick, right? E. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I can kind of extend that. There we go. So, I mean, I could have done a much better job there, but I'm just doing it pretty quick. So you can see how I can quickly edit these nodes as well, just like you can in Illustrator. What else do we have? We had some stars. So we do have shape over here. So we can make our stars if we want to. All right. So I could go in here and I could edit those nodes. Or, of course, I could also draw a star. That's an amazing star. Or I could also import a star as well. So if I had a star, an image of a PNG or a JPEG of a star, I could import that and kind of do a live trace too. So far so good. Again, I'm just rushing through this just for the sake of doing this. The NASA logo we downloaded as an SVG anyway, so I can import that. So if I just go File, Import, and I can import that as a separate file. There it is there, ready to go. Okay, and same with the rest of these here. So you can, pretty much without needing Illustrator, you could start to create these kind of designs as well, straight in Lightburn. And again, use these settings to cut it out. So that's it. Like I said, today's going to be a short session. It was just a follow-up from how we went yesterday. I didn't get many questions on any of the projects that you're working on, so I assume they're all amazing. But that was it. So that's your follow-up to session 1. So hopefully now you've done your Illustrator or maybe your Lightburn project. You've put it into Lightburn, you know how to get it ready to cut, and then you can cut it. Now, of course, we can do another thing too. I forgot to tell you. Maybe you want to do some engraving. I didn't talk about engraving, so let me just talk about engraving really quick. Let's go down here, and I'm going to write Paul, my biggest star. I'm going to put that down there. Now, if I want that to be engraved, there we go. There, we just change it to a fill color. That will engrave that. And the speed and power settings also apply here as well. So how fast you want it to go, and then how much power you want for engraving. So engraving takes a long time. It takes about 5 or 6 times longer to engrave than to cut. So you do want it to go at a faster speed, which means you may need to ramp up that power because it's going so fast. But you can do things like changing the line interval, which is the gap between these lines. The bigger that gap, that number there, the bigger the gap between the engraved lines, okay? But because it's burning the material, you might not notice much of a difference. I find I get away with 0.15 without seeing much of a difference, and it's going to be a lot faster than if it was right next to each other. And they'll engrave. So there you go. So that was part 2 of that lesson. So hopefully you can now take what you've got. So spend the next half an hour get your Illustrator files that you created, maybe download Lightburn and see if you can't get it ready for cutting. And then if you want to get it cut, by all means, maybe drop Bendigo Tech School an email and we'll see if we can cut it for you and get it out to you now that you're all back in the classroom. And of course, we'll be ready for taking classes start of term 3, which would be great. All right, so that's it for me. A nice short one tomorrow is going to be a bit longer tomorrow. We're going back into Photoshop, and our project for Photoshop tomorrow is going to be removing someone out of a photo. So maybe I'll try and get rid of Robbie out of a photo. So we'll do that one as another 2-parter. So I'll start tomorrow introducing Photoshop and the tools we'll need, and then we'll start working on a project, and then part 2 will be getting rid of that person. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope your projects finish up really well. Again, by all means, feel free to email your projects and we can